Turn on your soundbite recorder now, because here's one for free. I love Talking Joe because they're so precise and they're so real about the things that they are digging into. They care. They want every comic to be perfect because comics are expensive and they're hard to make. And nobody knows that better than Tim Finn. And that's why he offers such detailed critiques and analysis of every single panel of every single book they read. This is a dedication to quality that I, Brandon Jerwa, admire in the Talking Joe podcast. I'm Brandon Jerwa, and Tim Finn did not approve this message.
We're gonna talk about comics from Devil's Due. It's something you wondered if Talking Joe would ever do. I guess we'll explain it all to you. Gonna take some time to read the books we've never read.
Hey, everybody, it's me, Dr. Mark. And welcome to Talking Joe, the best and longest running dedicated G.I. Joe comics podcast. If you are new to the show, you can find out all of the details about us over at the website, which is talkingjoe.co.uk. Now, today we are continuing our look at the Disavowed era of G.I. Joe with issues 40 and 41, Union of the Snake, part 5 and 6 of 6, from Devil's Due, March and April 2005. Now, with that preamble done, I can introduce my co-host. As always, it's a real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners.
Hello to all of you. Where was it? Oh, in my latest update, I see that we're continuing to do well in Hong Kong, but this last month we have also been doing well in Egypt. So a big welcome to all of our new Egyptian listeners.
I'd particularly like to call out all of the citizens of Pyramid City, that's where that Deke episode. Is that Revenge of the Pharaoh? Yeah. Okay. The Sunbow episode is The Gods Below, 1985. And the Deke episode is Revenge of the Pharaohs. And the Night Creeper leader falls in love with Lady J after he gets bonked on the head in Pyramid City. So, there is a G.I. Joe reference for our listeners in Egypt. You're welcome.
Now, I thought before we get into these issues 40 and 41, it might be useful to explore the context to set the scene of what was going on in the wild and wacky world of Devil's Due comics back towards the beginning of 2005.
Yeah, these two issues are cover dated March and April 2005, but they must have shown up in stores in January 2005 and February.
Maybe possibly the month before, or
maybe
so.
December 04. Yeah.
So swirling around this time in January 2005, there were rumors hinting at cancellations, reboots, relaunches. And on the back of that, Josh Blaylock, president and founder of Devil's Due Publishing, took to the web to kind of lay some of those rumors to rest and sort of, break some news about the future of the book. So I thought let's talk about that and what it might mean for kind of what's going on in these issues. So it was announced back in January 2005 that issue 43 would be the last issue of the current G.I. Joe ongoing series, and then shortly after that a new series would be launched within the same continuity but set a year or so later. Now, this new book would be written by Joe Casey, who I guess was a popular writer but not nearly as well known as he was later on, and new artist Stefano Caselli and Brandon Jerwa will not be continuing the main book, but would be working on another top secret project, which I believe was going to be Snake Eyes Declassified. Tim Seeley also working on another project. So there was a number of reasons sort of stated for the relaunch. At this time, it was at the back end of the 80s boom now, so there was all sorts of 80s nostalgia properties that were launched, with G.I. Joe being the front runner for that in 2001. But Blaylock described G.I. Joe as being the lone survivor of that boom. Even Transformers had sort of imploded. The Dreamwave production had sort of collapsed, and the Transformers books were no longer on the shelves. So he sort of puts a lot of the blame on sort of the kind of the marketing struggle, the numbers for the books, that the sales had been ebbing away, and despite some pushes, so the Wraith with Michael Turner and Talent Caldwell, Serpentor coming back, Hawk being shot and paralyzed. Apart from that, nothing was there that sort of changed the dial significant enough that they could stay the course. He says that they want the 50,000 or so fans who left the book to come back again. So 50,000 left the book since its height in 2001 or so. Against the context of the 7 or so thousand that IDW is tracking at, it's quite a difference between eras. So Blaylock thought that just simply continuing as is with a few shake-ups wasn't enough. He had to sort of stop the existing book and launch with a new number 1. Tim, thoughts?
Yeah, so part of what Blaylock is referring to here is standard attrition. Mm-hmm. And comic book stores deal with this, and publishers deal with this all the time. Let's step aside for a moment variant covers where you can order 100 and then you get one special comic. Let's step aside from that. If a comic book store orders 20 copies of issue 1 of a series, they will generally cut that number in half for issue 2 and then cut it again. And around issue 5, that's sort of the number at which the comic book store will continue to order that series. And most series over time will slowly go down from there because people get busy, they run out of money, they don't like the book. And this is why, historically comic books, tend to end at, issue 50 or 100 or start over at a new number 1. And you can sort of reset that clock with excitement and higher print runs and sell through on issue 1 and issue 2. And it is the rare comic that goes up in sales over time, right? The big example from the last 20 years is The Walking Dead. Think of how many Image number 1s there have been. I don't mean the superhero stuff from, Todd McFarlane or Mark Silvestri as much as I mean all of the creator-owned stuff that didn't make it past issue 6 or issue 12. And The Walking Dead sales went up and up and up. So when this was happening with G.I. Joe, I think I read this interview at the time because in skimming it for today's episode, it felt really familiar. And I did, at the time, read the first 6 or 10 issues of the series that does replace this. I got excited by this announcement that the series was ending, relaunching, new writer, new artist. The new artist was a good step in a good direction for me. And I was a big fan of Joe Casey at the time. So Mark had just referred to he was not as well known, or he wasn't as well known maybe to the average G.I. Joe fan. Joe Casey had been writing Uncanny X-Men, and that run is uneven, but it's really interesting. And importantly, starting in 1999, 2000, Joe Casey takes over Wildcats. This is the second Wildcats series. He takes over after the first arc, which is Scott Lobdell. And he writes the second series and the third series. He writes Wildcats for, I forget, roughly 5 years. And that's when Wildcats goes from being a really good PG-13 book to a mature reader's book, when Wildstorm relaunches with all of its books, 4 comics or so as mature readers' book, the quote, Eye of the Storm sort of imprint that took over Wildstorm. Joe Casey did excellent work on Wildcats. So I was really psyched. I had the fundamental question, if you're going to start over, why not get Larry Hama? Just get Larry Hama. But if you're going to get someone who's new or outside of the world of G.I. Joe, Casey's a good person.
Had he definitely done X-Men by this point?
Yes, he'd already finished Uncanny X-Men, or he was still writing his run, which was 20 issues or longer. I forget, but it was Ron Garney and then Sean Phillips and then Chuck Austin took over writing. Anyway, back to G.I. Joe.
So what was interesting as well from the sort of the talking about this interview is that one of the things that Blaylock talks to is that what they'll be doing is altering the way that the G.I. Joe team operates and the structure of Cobra to make it more accessible to casual readers, new readers, and big name creative talent. And sort of reading between the lines there, it's saying if you've not grown up obsessed with G.I. Joe, then there's to get the big names in, it's a little bit of a hurdle when there's this massive cast and continuity to deal with. Let's sort of strip some of that back, and by having a smaller team, the smaller team that kind of has been implemented in these last few issues, that means that then there's less complexity to juggle for a new writer. So it feels like there's this editorial edict on these last few issues coming in of simplify down the story and the number of characters, clear things up, ready for a new writer to take on a stripped back version of G.I. Joe and Cobra.
Something which Mark and I probably should look into and think about for either our next episode wrapping up this run or the episode after starting the G.I. Joe series that begins after this with the new creative team is, in a general sense, what's happening in late 2004, early 2005 with G.I. Joe toys and comics sales, or what are the comics that are hitting really big at that time? Because just sort of, off the cuff, what's happening with the Transformers license at another publisher, what's happened with Thundercats, at DC Wildstorm, what are the G.I. Joe toys doing? Some of this may be that all the fans who show up for issue 1 back in 2001 are motivated by nostalgia and so the swirl of the events of the terrorist attacks of September 11th, and that there had been no G.I. Joe for a couple of years. And now at issues 40 and 41, G.I. Joe had been back for a couple of years. And so here comes what might be the elephant in the room. Maybe the 50,000 people who had been reading G.I. Joe around issue 1, who Blaylock invites to come back, maybe they don't love the book. So, there's a way of saying it like, oh, it may not be accessible, or a lot of characters or a lot of continuity. Maybe people didn't like the book. Maybe the book wasn't great and it needed not just a different take, but a change in quality.
Maybe there's also this barrier to the number. And I think, people, fans of continuity, do like continuation of the numbering, and there's a lot of joy to be had from the fact that Larry Hama started at issue 1 and is now almost at issue 300. But issue 44 versus a brand new issue 1 with a new creative team, the issue 1 is certainly feels like a much smaller barrier to entry to a casual fan who has lapsed and wants an accessible jumping on point.
Yes. And later in this interview, Blaylock says he was surprised by how many or how loud the comments were from fans who disagreed with starting over the numbering. He was surprised that people were, I guess, emailing in or typing on message boards that they didn't like that the book wasn't going to continue its numbering. So, people who are already in, it's like, well, they're going to buy the next issue, whether it's 44 or 1. But, absolutely, if you are a store A comic book store. Not mine. I'm referring to a page at the very end of issue 41, which I'll get to later in this episode.
And so sort of all that in mind, sort of, the Josh Blaylock having the writer credit last issue, which was probably written about in the time that Brandon Joe was finding out about this new change of direction, and kind of, some of the dynamics of where the story is heading over the last few issues and the couple of issues to come, does have that context against it of this is an era sort of being wrapped up with a definitive endpoint in mind, being written towards, and I think Brandon Joe sort of talked to before, having kind of a long vision of how he wanted to have his long story play out, and obviously that was very much curtailed with just a few months to wrap up, get to that endpoint.
We have a long history of beloved licensed comic books being canceled before the writer expects and having to wrap up things quickly, like Marvel's Transformers, right? In the letters page of issue 75, double-sized fight. It feels like they're gonna keep going and going and going, and then like one issue later, it's like, oh, we're canceled. Issue 80 is our final one. Issue 155 of G.I. Joe. There's no groundwork laid for it in the couple of issues beforehand. So that the next two issues of Devil's Due by Brandon Jerwa, 42 and 43, are each double-sized. That's neat.
There's some interesting context as well beyond just this book as well, which is that at the same time the Reloaded book is also being cancelled. So Blaylock talked to there just not being enough demand to support it, and although the response was good, especially with Chuck Dixon taking over the writing partway through, just wasn't selling it enough, and I think. And he was saying it was important that there is just one main book to focus on with the relaunch, and for that not to be a clear, unconfusing book, the one book for the reader to pick up.
This is a continual challenge for publishers, retailers, and then readers sort of get the blunt end of it or get to enjoy it. A publisher wants to get their money's worth. Devil's Due had spent money on the license, and if it can make more G.I. Joe comics, it can creatively succeed by telling more stories, and it can excite more fans, and it can make more money. Percentage goes back to Hasbro, but you make more money if you sell 2 comics than if you sell 1. Mm-hmm. But there's the argument about what the market will bear. Does it start to confuse or bother retailers, comic book stores, if they are ordering many different G.I. Joe things? Because if you have, if you're a comic book store and you've got 15 subscribers, you order 15 copies of G.I. Joe by Devil's Due, you set them aside for them. They come in every month and pick up their issues, and maybe you get a few extra for the rack. You're going to sell 15. If there's a second G.I. Joe book happening at the same time, and also a mini-series with some ninjas, and then also a mini-series where they're fighting alien robots, and then like a one-off graphic novel that's sort of manga-styled, that's a version of standard attrition. Okay, well, the main G.I. Joe book will get the 15. How many of these subscribers want the spin-off book? Okay, how many of them want the ninja mini-series? How many want the mini-series with the Transformers? No one has asked for this sort of one-off original graphic novel that's kind of manga styled. Well, we'll get 1 for the shelf for 0, or we'll get 5. And this happens with really popular characters supported by, big movies too. Avengers, Black Panther. When the writer Ta-Nehisi Coates took over Marvel's Black Panther, launched a new #1 drawn by Brian Stelfreeze, what was it, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years ago? That first issue sold like crazy. And as a comic book store owner, I was really excited. And as a reader, I was excited too. And very quickly, Marvel launched a spin-off miniseries that writer was like sort of co-plotting with some other writers who were not as familiar to comic book readers. And then very quickly there was a second spin-off miniseries. And Marvel was looking ahead. Marvel wanted more graphic novels ready for when, I forget, in the timeline of the cinematic universe with, Captain America Civil War and the Black Panther movie this is. But Marvel wanted to build up some graphic novels. As a store owner, I just saw the main Black Panther book and then a spinoff and then a spinoff. And the people coming in for the main book, maybe they didn't want the spinoff. And so we didn't order as many of, the spinoff and the other spinoff. So, G.I. Joe fans, if you feel like, this is sort of bummer news about, your favorite toy 80s nostalgia thing, companies are always sort of thinking about maxing out their brands. And it's the stores, it's the readers who have to, it's like, cool, how much money can I spend on G.I. Joe or Black Panther spinoffs this month?
So ironically, cancelling the current book, relaunching as America's Elite with the name change, that made it very clear as a jumping on point for readers back in 2005. But for then, not too long after that, it started to become quite confusing for people who wanted to jump on to the Devil's Due era of books, because you've got then these different titles of for the reading order. You've got the original trade paperbacks and books. You've got America's Really Elite. Then you've got Disavowed and Disavowed America's Elite, and just starting to get very confusing. So at the time, very clear. Subsequently, the change of name making things a little less clear. The other thing I was going to just note, I found a quote to back up the point about editorial as well. So Blaylock says, when a major change in the direction of the book is decided on a company-wide level, though, and a change in creative needs to happen, editorial always gets more hands-on, because it's very important to make sure that the new writer can start off with as clean a slate as possible.
So between the lines, he's saying, I had to do some writing with Jurwa to clear the decks for Casey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually getting into these two books, 40 and 41, they came from the creative team of Story, Brandon Joa. Brandon Joa. Pencils, Tim Seeley. Inks, Corey Hampshire. Colours, Brett R. Smith. Letters, Robin Spear of Dreamer Designs. Editor, Mark Powers. And now joined by Associate Editor Mike O'Sullivan from issue 41. Graphic design, Mike Norton. Production assistants, Sean Dove. And military consultation, Andrew Swenson.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Cover to issue 40 is a classically familiar comic book cover trope. And I mean that in a good way. It is the heroic character holding the body of someone important to them, or maybe an innocent bystander, and back arched, looking up and yelling in anger and or sorrow. It very slightly recalls Michelangelo's sculpture, the Pietà, but it's more immediately recalling a couple Spider-Man covers where he's holding Gwen Stacy or something. So this is Destro holding the Baroness. And what's remarkable, I like this cover. It's a nice drawing, nice pencils by Tim Seeley, who I'm often very hard on. What grabs me about this cover is it's a good composition, right? There are no sort of weak negative spaces or sort of mystery crops or bits of debris that I don't understand. And Val Staples, whose coloring I do like in comics, on X-Men comics and He-Man comics and Criminal and here occasionally in G.I. Joe. The whole thing is doused in orange. And this would look very different on a shelf next to a lot of other comics for that month. And interestingly, the Baroness does not appear in this issue at all.
Yeah.
She's referred to, and Destro is in one panel and two panels, and his helmet is in a third panel. So this cover is very much acting as a question for the outside, and the inside answers it, and a proper tease for readers and also for catalogs where the image is going to be shown ahead of time, so stores can order it in advance. So, and the green, the glowing green of Destro's eyes, I don't think they should glow, because this isn't like Megatron in the Transformers cartoon in 1984, like, I will have my revenge, and then his eyes glow red, and the episode is over. I don't think a regular person's eyes should glow, but I'll give it to you. I'll give it to the team of Seeley, Pep-Boy, and Staples.
Yeah, this scene definitely doesn't happen in this current issue, or even indeed the previous issue, where the Baroness is sort of seen. Well, the Baroness is believed to be on a plane that explodes and dies. So it's more, I guess, thematically talking to that idea of the tragedy of the loss of Baroness, isn't it? There's also a cover B, second printing, which takes quite an unusual approach, because it is exactly the same cover to A, but just cropped. So there is a zoom on Destro sort of crying out. Not an approach that you would see very often on a variant cover.
Oh yeah. We are just zoomed in on Destro, and we see just a tiny bit of the Baroness's sort of shoulder and torso on the bottom left, but otherwise it's the same color treatment, the same copy, the same words on the bottom, and interesting, yeah.
And both of these covers have an overlap of the foreground character and the logo, which must give it extra points, Tim.
Yes, if I recall, it's in the IDW era that doesn't really happen and should, and I think the Devil's Due era has had an easier time of it. But yes, and speaking of issue 41, yes, the cover to issue 41 is great. I almost thought, looking at it, is that Stefano Caselli? Because there's something really aggressive and textured and a little mannered about the clothing folds of Cobra Commander's cape and cowl, sort of more drawn and rendered than I'm used to seeing from Tim Seeley. And I think what's really happening here is Val Staples is really going to town, adding some lights and darks in his colors that sort of look like additional decisions in the penciling and inking. So this cover is only 2 colors. There's red, and then there's the grays of Cobra Commander. And there are some very, very light grays, which get to almost white, and then there's some blacks for little bits of shadow. There's the red logo on his mask, his chest. There's the red sort of rain or speed line, laser beam, dramatic color effects, and the his hand. So we're looking up at Cobra Commander. His arms are up, his eyes are closed, he's leaning back, his hands are up in victory. Whereas you know that Destro is upset in the previous cover. You know here that Cobra Commander is victorious.
The rain begins.
Yes, which is also part of why I think it's rain, because I see that word and I think of the other spelling and meaning of that word. The only little misstep of this cover is the sort of how perfectly the Devil's Due logo, the circle, lands on Cobra Commander's hand. But points for having his other arm in front of the G.I. Joe logo. Oh, also, I wish the N of the word rain didn't cover the signature. Yeah. I feel like when that kind of thing happens, the designer who's putting the copy on the cover should like send a message over to the colorist and say, hey, can you move the signature up? Or do I have your permission to move the signature up? But this is a great cover, and this is right up there with the J. Scott Campbell and Mike Zeck covers. It is powerful, it's dramatic, it pops from a distance, it's a great drawing, great color. It manages to both be sort of the like generic pinup cover of the like Bill Jemas, Joe Quesada, Ultimate Spider-Man era of Marvel, 2000 to 2003, when covers just had to have one character in it, like a pinup with no story. And yet also it actually does reflect the interior of the issue.
Very good. Yeah, agree with all of that. One of my very favorite covers from the Devil's Due era. Great stuff. Let's have a recap of what happens in these two issues with a plot breakdown. Following the destruction of the pit and Fort Huachuca, the US military retaliates with a tactical nuclear strike on Cobra Island, with Barrel Roll tasked with dropping the bomb. Cobra Commander flees to the Monolith base at Bad Hickistan, leaving the traitorous Coil army behind to die in the blast as retribution for their prior treachery. Barrel Roll's brother Thomastal commits to Cobra and becomes Blackout. Cobra Commander and Dr. Mindbender test the Tempest, a weather dominator machine which rains down a deadly Death Angel virus rain as a deadly proof of concept on the citizens of Jeska. Dr. Cassandra Knox replaces Dr. Mindbender on Cobra's high command, and Mindbender is shot and left to bleed out on the floor. The Joes invade the new Cobra stronghold in Bad Hickistan. The small team attack on several fronts and invade the base with comparative ease. Dr. Mindbender helps the Joes to neutralize the Tempest device in his final moments, while Blackout finds himself unable to attack the Joes as he overhears his brother's heroism. Cobra Command slip away with Zartan reappraising his loyalties and Destro's faction escaping from imprisonment. Meanwhile, G.I. Joe's Iceland outpost is attacked by Overlord. Scanner sacrifices himself, setting a self-destruct to the base to save Snake Eyes, Duke and Scarlet, who are locked in a bomb shelter. A few days later, a rescue team recovers them. In another subplot, the mysterious group called the Red Shadows makes its first appearance. General Joe Colton meets with Hector Ramirez. They are both killed by the Red Shadows leader, a person that Joe Colton was familiar with. Finally, as Cobra Commander and the Crimson Twins hide in the caves of Bad Hickistan mountains, they are found by a female Red Shadow who informs them that they have liquidated all of Cobra's assets before she opens fire on them.
Mark, you mentioned Barrel Roll's brother here, Blackout.
Mm-hmm.
He's not named, correct? He's not given his code name.
Oh, I thought that maybe he was. I didn't notice it on my read through.
All right, so I'm flipping through 41, and Co-Commander, the next kill is yours, Mr. Stahl. Be prepared. So that's 41, and then I don't think anyone is talking to him. Mr. Stahl, go ahead of me and make sure my personal extraction procedures. I don't think anyone calls him.
Okay. Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not.
You know, if in the next issue someone's gonna, I dub you Blackout, or Megatron, I dub you Black. Anyway.
Yeah, I guess maybe not. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Let us know if we have missed it.
If in Jurwa's mind he already has the name, this is a problem because this character should be named. If it's going to be a story moment where he's given the name in a future issue, that's fine.
What struck me was we've got, again, 2 issues that have just got a whole lot going on. And it's all really struck me again going through that plot breakdown. And that's a slimmed down plot breakdown, and we compare that to kind of some of the simplicity of Hammer's most recent issues. A cloned Genghis Khan breaks out of his tube, fights the G.I. Joe team, defeats them, and they retreat to escape. You could kind of summarize it in a single line. Very hard to do that with these issues. There's a lot of characters, a lot of moving parts, and a lot of high stakes in these 2 issues. We've got the nuke on Cobra Islands. What gets bigger than a tactical nuke? Well, what potentially is bigger is the Tempest device. We finally find out exactly what this is. It's a device that seemingly would create rain, and when combined with a deadly virus, that rain can exterminate a populace.
Sort of melt them.
Yeah. Pretty horrific stuff.
Well, in some recent episodes of our show, you've been encouraging us to start with something positive.
Mm-hmm.
and I have already given my positive, which is that I really like these two covers. And I really like the cover to 41.
Mhm.
And I don't have anything else positive to say about these issues.
I think you're not trying hard enough, Tim. I enjoyed them. I enjoyed them.
Oof. I think a lot of things don't work in these two issues, and okay, I'll start with something small and petty. What is up with General Rey's hair?
You're obsessed with this man's hair, Tim.
It's really, I mean, I'm obviously jealous because he's in his 50s and he has a lot of hair and I don't. Although I'd like to think I've made this look work for me in the last 10 years. And, but if he's got a buzz and he's got like a lot of coverage, I feel like there need to be some lines in there, but it's drawn as if it's like painted on or like an adhesive.
Yeah, just imagine, Tim, that it's not hair and it's just a very tightly fitting, stylized helmet.
So weird. But he's got a little bit of receding on the left and right of his upper forehead, but then he's got these sort of sideburns that a younger, cooler person would have. And to me, it sort of
cut your finger on those sideburns.
It sort of speaks to the, like, he's old and he's young, he's cool and he's not cool. It's like the shoulder armor of his costume. Anyway, so that's my that I have a note here, right? Is this page 1 of issue? Yes, page 1. The first thing I wrote for this issue: what is up with Rey's hair? But things get there are bigger stakes here. So in issue 40, I greatly disagree with the decision to and the execution of the Joes dropping a tactical nuke on any place on Earth, B, a sovereign nation. Cobra Island doesn't belong to the U.S. And yes, that we could have some discussion about how the Joes are America's in a state of war against Cobra, and that's ongoing through the whole G.I. Joe storyline.
But specifically, 2 U.S. military bases were just destroyed by Cobra.
Well, as a comparison, Mark, after 3 important locations in America, I should say 2 tactically and culturally important locations in America were attacked by terrorists in 2001, and a third place was inadvertently attacked. It was a field. We didn't nuke Afghanistan or Iraq or Pakistan.
But that is a populace. That's a people. Whereas I guess you attack the attack in real life was by a specific subset of terrorists. Where so it's hard to say attack drop a nuke on a particular country and you're not going to have any collateral damage. Whereas everyone on Cobra Island is allied to Cobra, more or less, aren't they?
Yeah, but there's fallout, and there's this general agreement in the world in the last 75 years that we do not activate nuclear devices. And Brandon Jerwa's script has this introduced too abruptly with little emotional reaction from characters and no discussion of stakes. And I'm okay with someone who hasn't served in the military writing an action comic, a military comic. I'm okay with people who haven't been police officers writing detective stories or crime stories or police stories. This reads as a very young person not doing any research or just sort of thinking about the history and the scope. It's like, we don't drop nukes. We don't. I know that this comic is like one step in the future or one step into sci-fi or one step into a heightened reality. Oh man, I don't like that decision. It just reads as very off for
heavy-handed.
me. Yeah, but sorry, not just heavy-handed, but cheap. And this is already in 2 issues where lots of characters are killed, and So it's a double whammy for me.
And do you remember, Tim? It was it's not the first time that we've seen this in the Devil's Due era, because there was also this threat of a nuclear strike on Cobra Island in the Versus Transformers story that was written by Josh Blaylock.
I had forgotten that, so thank you for the reminder. We did review that in an episode. I don't think I brought that up. Hi, Jay. Jay was in that episode. I would counter by saying that is much more of a sci-fi story because there are aliens. There are alien robots.
And the difference there was that I guess that was seen, much more as a bad thing, and the Joes were sort of against a ticking clock to try and use other means to defeat the enemy with that, and avoid the need for the nuke.
And not that the writers of Transformers stories ever sort of use as much power as is invested in the Transformers themselves and their weapons, but if you read the toy tech specs, like Megatron can just like make explosions. That's just a power of his. And I forget the scale of them, but they're really big. And so anyway, back to issue 40 and 41. I think the page after the bomb is dropped, where the Joes are starting to react, is a good start. But the scene where it's page 2, right? Like Shipwreck and Mercer are bickering, and I don't like it, but that's okay, right? It's like good try. And very abruptly, Rey says, "The Joint Chiefs have called for an action that hasn't been taken in decades, and we have a duty to carry out their orders. Cobra will be dealt with once and for all. We're going to drop a tactical nuke on Cobra Island." And the scene cuts to Cobra Island, and I gasped, like, oh, no, this needs a page of the Joes in that scene reacting. Like, I'm sorry, General Rey, did I hear you correctly? We're dropping a nuclear device on Cobra Island? Like, you heard me right, Shipwreck. Like, whoa, no. Oh, goodness, no. It's the drama of that scene is so deflated and cut off. It's as if he said, "We are dropping a regular mega heavy bomb." But like, no, a nuke is a different scale. Anyway, we can move on, because you'll just hear the like musical concern, like, no, in my voice.
So on this theme, on the destruction of Cobra Island, I saw a parallel there to the creation of Cobra Island. So if you remember back in issue 41, Strategic Diplomacy, G.I. Joe essentially was tricked into doing Cobra's work for them. And I think originally there was talk of dropping a nuke, but instead they came up with an alternative plan, which was to build up lots of conventional explosives, set them off, but that triggered an earthquake, which created Cobra Island, which was what Cobra had planned all along. And yeah, Cobra lost because Cobra Island was created, and Cobra took that as their base. It's almost the reverse this time round, that Cobra have tricked G.I. Joe into launching a large explosion which destroys Cobra Island and the traitorous inhabitants that are left there, while Cobra proper have escaped to an alternative location.
That is a nice bookend, and that Cobra Commander is tricking and trapping all the traitors into one place. He and the loyalists all leave, and it's the Joes who do his dirty work for him. That's a great, deliciously evil Cobra Commander thing to do. I'm so distracted by the unthoughtfulness of the portrayal of the weapon and its scale and its effect. And even, I've been hard on Seeley's drawing, and I've been hard on Seeley's storytelling. The actual page where it's 2 pages before the big explosion, right? Cobra Commander says, "This is the end. This is the beginning. The end is betrayal and treachery." And in that second panel, when he's saying the end of betrayal and treachery, it's a very calm, steady, straight shot. it's technically 1 point linear perspective, but there aren't many vanishing lines, so we could basically call it optical perspective. There's just things in front of other things to show that they are closer or further. But there are 15 coil soldiers. They're all just standing. They're all turning their heads a little bit to the left to this giant window. Through it, we see some clouds and 3 little somethings, which are approaching jets. And I guess they start to realize that 3 jets are coming up them, and they put 2 and 2 together, that the speech that Cobra Commander is giving them is that they're in trouble and they're doomed. And then on the bottom of the next page, they're running around. Oh God, he's insane. Even that doesn't sort of work for me, because it's like, I actually don't care that 2 panels worth of sort of anonymous coil soldiers. It's like, yep, good job, Cobra Commander. Take some chess pieces off the board. Back to you, Mark.
Okay, so that's I guess the main A story for issue 40. Let's sort of follow that through into 41. So Cobra has relocated into Badhikistan. They've tested their weapon with fairly gruesome results, and then they're attacked by this small G.I. Joe squad from various angles. They're being hit from land. I'd like to say land, sea, and air, but it's sort of sea, air, and more air, because you've got sea squads, you've got a helicopter squad, you've got a parachute squad, and then you've got Barrel Roll, who's attacking the Tempest device in the air. This small squad sort of attacks with pretty effective results. It sort of and I wonder whether this is part of the change in direction editorial, but Cobra, after this grand scheme that has been built up over all of this time, the threat of this Tempest device, these clever machinations to sort of get G.I. Joe to destroy Cobra Island, an almost 10-man squad then takes them down.
Yeah, issue 41, page 11, Tomax and Xamot run in. Cobra Commander, we have several critical situations. The Joes have managed to wipe out the bulk of our air and sea forces with 2 strikes. What? They have? The bulk? Was 93% of all of Cobra those coil guys that just got destroyed on Cobra Island? Like, wait, 10 Joes with like 1 helicopter and like 1 shark? And I feel like stuff is missing. And I like the surprise that Cobra Commander in these 2 issues goes from being the greatest villain in history with this incredible weapon, these 2 incredible weapons, and he's going to blackmail the entire planet and be in charge and kill a lot of people, to being taken down completely by the Joes and then maybe even killed by this surprise new character in a cave who maybe also kills Tomax and Xamot. Oh my goodness. But the sort of Jerwa keeping track of numbers of characters and sort of numbers of vehicles, maybe I'm not doing my part as reader. I'm not sort of keeping score, and maybe it actually is all sort of explained, but I feel like we lost a bunch of armament and defenses somewhere, and it became very easy in half an issue for the Joes to entirely beat Cobra.
Yeah, their entire sea forces is kind of on this oil platform or whatever that is attacked by the whale or whatever, and the air force is sort of on the runway at the Monolith base. And shot at by a surprise attack from the G.I. Joe helicopter.
But doesn't that Air Force look like 4 Rattlers or something?
Yeah, I mean, exactly everything that we know about the size and variety of the Cobra armaments, it doesn't seem like that would be it, unless in this rush to move to this new base, they've only got a seemingly quite small capability that they can draw on locally.
There's a panel in issue 41. This will be. I'll say one more thing about Tim Seeley's artwork in these 2 issues, and then I'll just talk about other stuff. In issue 41, page 10, the first panel, it's a close-up of General Rey, his head and shoulders. He's in the cockpit of this helicopter. And there's a big disconnect between what the script is calling for and how the dialogue and the lettering treatment do support that, and how the artwork do not support that. This guy's helicopter is going down, and I think he might die or get his legs shattered and, fly through the windshield or get, burned. And he says, "Hold on to something." And Seeley draws a very calm General Rey. Yes, his teeth are gritted, but he's not pushing against the stick. He's not pulling against the stick. He's not twisting. He's not leaning forward. He's not bracing against his seatbelt, his restraint harness. It's not, to use a film term, it's not a Dutch angle. Seeley hasn't tipped the view sort of at a diagonal. And as a comparison, and this isn't a fair comparison because this isn't quite a crash, but look at the cover to G.I. Joe issue number 70 from the Marvel run, right? It's a different scene. That's Wild Bill in the cockpit, and there's a pistol pointed at his head. And Ron Wagner, in drawing this cover, there could be more tension in that, sort of the Mike Zeck version of that cover, I can imagine, even more sort of tense muscles. But I've always been worried about Wild Bill on the cover to issue 70, and I'm not worried about Rey in this panel in issue 41. And then 3 panels later, he's completely fine. He's running away from the helicopter, which has just crashed, although I guess it's sort of skidded and didn't like crumple and break apart and explode. And that's fine. Like, Jerwa can decide that it's sort of a good crash and not a bad crash. But it speaks to this sort of the stakes feel all inconsistent in this story, where it's very easy for someone to show up for a panel and gut someone or shoot them or blow them up. But there isn't room for sort of the realism of injury and risk and violence, and then going back to the stakes of the very large weapon deployed in the previous issue. So that, combined with how crowded the story is, a lot of characters and action and scene changes that you referred to, and then also a couple, for me, real missteps in the dialogue, which I can point out in a moment. These are the things that come together for me where I don't connect to these issues at all.
Okay. All right, Tim. So let's follow the kind of the plot through. We've got Mindbender being shot and being left for dead, helping the Joes in his final moments. We've got Blackout, or Thomas Stall, not turning full heel and not taking that kill shot that could have finished the Joe's mission. The successful defeat of the Tempest Device by a barrel roll, smashing into it with his aircraft and ejecting at the last minute, and tying up that plot in a relatively neat bow. Then we've got kind of the B and C stories, if we'll move on to those. So we've got a return of Scanner, Scott Sturgis, from issue 26 in Iceland. It doesn't feel like that this storyline is necessarily particularly essential to the plot. So given everything that happened there, perhaps this could have been put to one side. So yeah, the attacked by Overlord, explode the base. Overlord and Scanner seem to be killed, and the rest of the Joes are rescued. Possibly it's needed as a reminder that Snake Eyes, Scarlet, Duke are elsewhere, otherwise engaged and not part of the main story.
In previous episodes, I commented, and maybe you also did, and I think Jay Cordray, our co-host of previous episodes, also did, that when the green shirts showed up, it seemed like they were showing up so that they could later be killed. And the Scanner stuff here, I see the dramatic attempt to have his death mean something, and I guess I'd rather it's him than one of the other marquee Joes in the scene. But it's so abrupt, you know, like I wasn't quite sure what had happened on the final panel, of issue 40, because I don't see Scarlet and Overlord in the same space. She's looking somewhere, I'm not sure where, and then we see Overlord, but I don't know that they're in the same room or how much distance is between them. Sort of not sure what Overlord has done to Scanner, because he's got a little blood dripping from his finger, and there's a little, I mean, I understand from the context, and I'm not looking for Scanner to be like facing us with a giant wound on him, but it's sort of abrupt. And again, like, I don't know that this needed sort of another villain, another character. It's like, not only does Scanner come back from previous issues, so does Overlord. I wanted to point out 2 bits of dialogue. Oh, this is in issue 40. Rey gives this speech to the Joes on page 2. So the second page of these 2 issues that we're talking about. Rey says, he breaks up the argument, the fight between Shipwreck and Mercer. He says, I can appreciate the tension you're all feeling. You've watched innocent people die and seen your home destroyed. You also have a new commanding officer. You don't know him or trust him. Times are bad. But we are all that's left of G.I. Joe. We can't afford dissent and mistrust. All right, on the surface, I like that speech. But this line right here, you also have a new commanding officer and you don't know him or trust him. That's not the way you'd say it. You'd say something like, we haven't worked together, or you would just stop. You have a new commanding officer. You wouldn't actually say the words, you don't know him or trust him. That feels like that's sort of the writing you do when you expect all of your readers to expect that this guy might actually be a secret agent. He's a Cobra bad guy. That it's too on the nose. It's not diplomatic enough. And then a couple pages later, Joe Colton is meeting Hector Ramirez at some kind of restaurant or diner in New York City. And Colton says, G.I. Joe is a highly classified operation, and I've been taken out of the loop. If you're looking for a story, he says this right as the waitress is bringing him coffee. Now, I understand that, Flint wrote a book, and Roadblock is a chef, and G.I. Joe is public knowledge or more public knowledge in this universe. But if you ever talk to someone who works in government or for the CIA, when you start talking about something that's classified, even if you're not going to be specific, you get a little quiet, you look left and right, and you sort of don't finish the sentence right when the waitress comes up. And so this might just be a small little miscommunication between sort of what the script is calling for and where Seeley is drawing, panel 2. But it's like, hey.
You also probably wouldn't sit in one of those booths where there's people sat behind you.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you and I have learned all that spycraft from,
Yeah.
James Bourne,
Jason
Bourne movies. And then at the bottom of this page, there's a storytelling thing I found a little confusing. The panel on the bottom left, Hector Ramirez is sitting in the taxi with his leg out. So he's getting into the taxi. And then the next panel, something is exploding. And there's a person who's the exact same size as Hector Ramirez. And I think that's Colton.
Mm-hmm.
But it sort of looked like that's Ramirez. And for a second I thought, oh, did the taxi blow up around Ramirez and it throws him away from the explosion? And I'm probably looking too hard. And this is where, Mark, you say no, Tim, that's clearly Colton. Ramirez is in the explosion. It's clear from the context.
Yeah, it's not that explosion isn't necessarily the greatest depiction of an explosion,
right.
But it's clear from the context what is meant to be happening, including that.
So, and then there's a bit of dialogue which I really wanted this scene to work. This is still in issue 40. So, Cobra Commander approaches the man who will be Blackout, and there's a really helpful line from Major Blood who says, he's a Joe trainee, or so he claims. The interrogator has already cleared him, which leads me to believe he might actually be telling the truth. So, okay, he's already been cleared by the interrogator, which might mean a very heavy interrogation. I'm not sure. And Cobra Commander has never met this guy, this sort of former Joe recruit. And they have a 3-panel conversation. And Cobra Commander says, do you want to be on my side? And, you know, I have sympathy for Jerwa because it sort of seems like Blaylock said, oh, sorry, you have 2 months to wrap up the story. You thought you had 10 or 30 issues. You have 3 issues, or you have 4 issues, and 2 of them will be double-sized. Sorry, and you're done. But Cobra Commander seems really familiar with and trusting of this guy he's never met. And also, Cobra Commander is really important and dangerous and distrustful and brilliant. And he's talking to this guy like this is their 16th conversation. Like, I think finally I know that you're on our side, Blackout. And then 8 pages later, just a couple hours later, they're getting off of a cargo plane, and this guy that Cobra Commander just met, and yeah, he's been cleared by the interrogator, is standing right next to Cobra Commander, behind him with a machine gun. And then also in the next issue, in issue 41, Cobra Commander says 10 minutes later, all right, Blackout, go on this mission, kill some Joes if you see them. And Blackout is just standing there with a machine gun. And there isn't really a comparison in a Real American Hero G.I. Joe comics, the Marvel run or the continued IDW run, because we haven't seen a Joe become a Cobra or Cobra become a Joe Storm Shadow, right? But, well, maybe that's the comparison, right? And, Mercer as a character type also hasn't shown up in the Larry Hama G.I. Joe. But there is a bit of a comparison in the animated series from the 80s. There's a 2-parter in season 1 in 1985 called The Traitor, where Dusty leaves G.I. Joe and joins Cobra. And it's great. The writing is so great. There's a scene where it establishes the problem. Dusty's mom can't pay her bills. Tomax and Zaymot meet him at a bar and taunt him, but offer him money if only he'll give Cobra some secrets. And he says, well, just some small ones. And then he's on trial because he's been found out, and Cobra rescues him. Cobra crashes the transport bus before or after the trial and takes him away. And the Joes think, oh no, our guy is gone and he's a traitor. And in part 2, there are 1 or 2 great scenes where Cobra Commander is talking with Dusty, and he's really happy that he's turned him. And you're sort of waiting for Dusty to say, I'm a double agent. I'm actually a Joe after all. Take that. Chrome Dome, Fang Face, punch. And so the comparison actually that I do see to the Larry Hama G.I. Joe is in the current issues, the newest issue, 297, and 1 or 2 issues ago, where Cobra Commander is sort of being too nice and too trusting, where he's talking with tourists at his casino on Cobra Island. And he's just in the casino, giving chips and dinner tickets to random civilians who are gambling at his casino. And I thought, that's funny. Also, this guy has armies and pistols and he kills people. This feels a little weird. So here I see Cobra Commander in the Jerwa run, just talking to this guy. It's oh, hey, Stahl, how you doing? Do you want a gun? Go kill some Joes. I've never met you.
So in the conclusion, almost the conclusion to 41, we see Joe Colton shot dead by this mysterious new character in red, who we think must be related to the Red Shadows, because we know that next issue is the Dawn of the Red Shadows. And just 2 pages on from his appearance, there is a giant double-page advert saying G.I. Joe, Cobra, no one is as safe, the Red Shadows. So not too much of a mystery as to what faction he belongs to. But yeah, poor Joe Colton.
Yeah. So, these 2 issues, I don't like the nuke. There's too many characters and too many stories, and there's some art and dialogue and scripting misfires for me. But sort of the icing on the cake, in this case, a cake I don't want, is the killing off of many characters. And I want to draw a comparison for everyone. Issue 155 of G.I. Joe is the final issue of a long-running G.I. Joe story. And in it, the writer manages to kill off no one. The Joes don't kill Cobra Commander and have a definitive victory. They don't kill off everyone but Cobra Commander, and he gets away, and that sort of promises more stories. Cobra Commander doesn't manage to kill off a favorite character like Snake Eyes or Stalker. It's a story that's about what it is to be a soldier, both sort of generally and also like in G.I. Joe. And certainly Jurwa is not trying to end his story with one self-contained issue, the way that 155, it's by itself. It doesn't wrap up anything from, some previous issues. Jurwa is trying specifically to wrap up several plots. But if someone is ever going to pick up the Marvel run with, say, an issue 156, isn't it nice that all the characters that were in issue 155 are available? And whoever's going to pick up G.I. Joe after 40, 41, 42, 43, we've already said goodbye to several characters, around issue 25 and maybe the Baroness 2 issues ago. But I don't know that anyone's mourning Scanner, but there are so many characters that are taken off the board here. If it's like a fake out, like, oh, Colton's not really dead, it's like, well, this is happening too often. And if it's not, and these are all sort of actual final deaths, it is either cynical or thin. And I think Jurwa could end his run. It's like, yeah, I get it. You want to show that Cobra Commander is the worst, but actually there's someone even worse. And man, you must be amazing if you can sort of sneak into Cobra Commander's base and point blank shoot at him and Tomax and Zaymot. And I don't actually think Cobra Commander's dead. I think we'll see him in the next issue or in a couple of issues. Mm-hmm. But killing a bunch of characters on your way out feels like you're not putting the toys back on the shelf for the next kid who's going to play with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It feels like you are breaking a couple of them to show how cool your final game with these toys is. So a friend of mine many years ago, and I don't know if we were talking about G.I. Joe or sort of regular Marvel and DC, but he said, he was sort of saying this to me, but he was sort of speaking to the world of writers. He said, don't kill characters, like Death of Superman or like Death of Wolverine or Death of Captain America. Like, in superhero stuff, it can make some really exciting, like 3-year stories. Like, what do you do without Superman? You have no Superman and then some imposters and then he comes back. And that's a fun cycle, but you can't do that more than once. Although they just did it again. And, with G.I. Joe, it's like, oh, really don't do this. Cause if it's like, well, we can clone Dr. Mindbender and we can clone Serpentor. But it's much harder as a writer to not kill characters. It's like, okay, how do you raise the stakes and create drama for your reader? It's really easy to take a character and kill them and say to the reader, this is a big deal, right? That character's dead. And in the letters page of these 2 issues, mm-hmm. the answer to some of the letters or the introduction is like, we take character deaths really seriously. I think they thought about it a lot. I still think they made the wrong call.
Yeah, that letter in the back of 41 from Kevin Gill I thought was very good. He said, I feel the killing off of underused Joe characters without any sort of character development is a bad move. I don't claim to be a writer, so I'm not saying I can do a better job, but this is just a request. Before you kill another hardball or tracker, give them more than a page to develop a little. These are basically virgin characters aside from their file cards, and they were basically treated like green shirts. Develop the obscure characters before you kill them, because in some cases, that will be the only chance that they will have had to be in the comic.
And you could sort of take the logic of that request a step further, because I think the Devil's Due response might be, it's like, well, yeah, with Scanner, right? It's like, no, he had a whole issue to himself where he was this character, and then we brought him back. So he has had some development. But sort of for every character who gets 1 page, as per this request, I want a whole issue, or I want them to become maybe not a stalker or like a roadblock character who's in the whole run, but a ripcord. Someone who's in 10 or 15 issues and then comes back once or twice, 100 issues later. And the natural, logical conclusion of this request, give them at least a page, not one panel. Give them at least an issue, not one page. Give them at least several issues, not one issue. Give them at least, a year or two is, no, just don't kill them. I think I feel differently about this now in my 40s than I did in my 20s when these comics were coming out. At the time, and I wasn't reading, this run, I had left the book around issue 10, but I remember, they killed a Joe and someone reading the book and they told me, and I thought, I don't like that. But I think right now, talking to this microphone and you, Mark, it sort of hurts me more, even though, this is like a pocket continuity that doesn't, quote, count, has been disavowed. Because I see that it's like every character is someone's favorite character. And if you kill that character, you disappoint that reader. Yeah. Don't kill characters. How about this? Imagine if, who was it who died in issue 25? Was it Flash or Zap?
A few people, yeah. Flash, Chuckles, probably more that I'm not remembering immediately off the top of my head.
Okay, so Chuckles had the 4-issue frontline arc, and did you say Flash? Flash had basically done nothing in the Devil's Due run. He'd probably shown up for a couple panels, but people remember him from 82, one of the first toys. He's in the comic for the first year or two. Imagine if in the entire Devil's Due run, no one had died, and they kill one Joe in these 2 issues that we read for this episode, or one Joe in the final 2 issues for our next episode. Maybe it's Scanner, or maybe it's Joseph Colton. That would hit so much harder. But now you sort of expect it. Like, oh yeah, Devil's Due, they're killing a lot of Joes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're probably done talking the main points of the book. Should we have a look at some I Spies?
Yeah.
I spy with my little eye.
So here's one for you, Tim. There's a Toxo Viper doing a Toxo Viper thing. They're handling a Death Angel virus in a canister.
Yeah, is this so help me out, because they look like Toxo Vipers.
It looks like a sort of a Devil's Dewified Toxo Viper version 2.
Okay, and their color scheme, it's not a garish green, and there's some sort of gray.
Yeah, like slightly more muted kind of versus the kind of the toy. So the green is toned down a bit. The blues become a little bit more like greys. The red of the mask becomes a little bit more like orange.
I like that. Is it possible that there's a recolor of these toys from around 2003 or 4?
No, we've got Toxo Viper 1, 1988, Toxo Viper 2, where they sort of become this green look, and then we don't see them again until 2014 with the version 3, the modern era look. So this is the thing that Devil's Due do, which is to kind of update a look and sort of tweak it slightly.
Okay. And I Spy, this is in issue 40. On that same page, 2 panels down, we see some Cobra, I'll call them Vipers, and they've got big astronaut suits. And they only appear in these 2 panels at the bottom of this page. And I guess they most resemble the Star Brigade Battletech Bat. The Bat with 2 A's, the Battle Android, is it Astronomical Trooper?
Yeah.
Where it's the much chunkier black and white suit with a red sort of visored bat. And this is not that. I think these are men, not robots. And they're in much chunkier astronaut suits. What you see when an astronaut is going to go on a spacewalk, not when they're just in their blue togs inside the space shuttle or space station. These 2 panels, whatever kind of, I'll call them Shuttle Vipers or Astro Viper version 2s, whatever they are, they're not named, which is a bummer, but it's fun to see them. That sort of Jerwa or Seeley just invented a new Cobra soldier for this quick appearance.
Yeah, cool. I've got some new toys.
New toys!
So these are toy tie-ins with new character designs to correspond to the toys that are out in the shops during this era. So we have a Barrel Roll appearing, and appearing as his V2 red costume variant. So we see a Barrel Roll in a red costume in issue 40, as opposed to the blue that he had been appearing in beforehand. I have got a Python Patrol Viper. I don't know if you picked up on that, the sort of the black looking Viper with the kind of the crisscrosses, which was a 2004 Venom versus Valor variant of the Viper, although on the packaging it didn't call it specifically Python Patrol, but it was obvious that's what it was.
Is this where the visor is black?
They have, a black visor and show up a few times.
Tell me, what do we see? This isn't issue 40. What do we see on page 6? It's the panel after Dr. Mindbender presses his hand to activate the weather control device. We see what sort of looks like a Cobra flight pod, a trouble bubble. I think we actually see 3 of them. In the panel.
I think this is the Devil's Due version of the Trouble Bubble, which I believe appeared in the Battle Files.
Okay, but not a toy.
Not a toy.
Okay.
Whereas Dr. Mindbender on that page in the white lab coat type look is a new toy. So I think this might be the first time that he appears in this look in Devil's Due. I might be forgetting it if he appeared before, but before I think he was in this sort of long kind of purple type suit or coat. So I think this is his swan song in his new toy costume. On that same page, we've got Major Blood, who is holding out his hand to touch the rain. He had his hand cut off a couple of issues previously by General Rey, and Richard Straw on the boards pointed out that is a nod to the speculation that people have had since his very first appearance as to what his right hand actually is. Is it a kind of an armored hand? Is it a robot hand? Now, given it has been chopped off, it must be now some sort of prosthetic.
For the record, my brother and I assumed in 83, 84 that it was a robot hand because we had seen The Empire Strikes Back. We'd seen someone get their hand chopped off, and then they got a new hand.
Mm-hmm.
A robot hand.
So new toys still. We've got Blackout in his actual Blackout costume. We have in that 41, in that ocean attack from the Joes, we have a Sting Raider, which I think is a submarine. It's that thing with the kind of the jaws and the blades on either sides. An interesting looking craft. The name itself was reused as a completely different toy in 2009, which was they called the Water Moccasin, the Sting Raider, for some weird reason. And then my final new toy appearance is one that I'm not entirely sure about, but I'll point to just in case. Around this time, a toy playset was released called Conquest of Cobra Mountain, which was a mountainous Cobra base, which I wonder whether that was the inspiration for this monolith base.
Interesting. When I saw this, and this is a page turn. You're looking at the right page, you turn the page onto the left page, and Tomax and Zaymot and Mindbender are revealing this big, craggy mountain with a big rock stone cobra and a garage door up a trail and some kind of landing strip with some cargo bay doors and some gun pods, and then a thing on the bottom. How would you describe it? It's like what's on the top center of the Terradrome. It's a
like a missile silo or something. Yeah,
a missile silo.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw this and I immediately thought of Kenner's 1985 Mask Boulder Hill playset, which is a sort of mountain with a giant boulder on the top and a gas station. built into the side of it, but it's got this garage door, and you sort of turn things, and it's actually like little lasers. And I thought, hey, it's like, oh, and also it sort of reminds me of a Snake Mountain from He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Also in this issue, in issue 40, is a Televiper doing a Televiper thing. He's pointing it's not a gun, it's not a giant laser beam or flashlight. It's a two-way video camera monitor thing. This is from the original action figure. He's pointing it at Cobra Commander, so Cobra Commander can broadcast his final threat to all of the traitorous Coil soldiers that he's about to have destroyed.
Very good. He's shooting Cobra Commander's face at the unsuspecting Cobra Coil forces. I didn't have any other I Spies, so we can move on.
Is Dr. Knox? Can you remind us? So
seriously, Tim.
Didn't we just see her on a B cover of issue 297 of G.I. Joe: Real American Hero?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Okay, no, I now remember that she's from is it 153 Shadow of the Bat?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Remind us when else we've seen her in the Blaylock Jurwa comic.
Oh, good question.
Because they brought her back before this. Note to self: this is still not Dr. Biggles Jones. She has brown hair and a white lab coat. But if Dr. Knox walked into the scene and put on Mindbender's white lab coat, I might think it's Dr. Biggles Jones.
So going by the excellent My Useless Knowledge website that has a profile for Dr. Knox, it looks like her appearances are limited to issue 153, 36, 37, 39, and 40. So we have just seen her in fairly fleeting glimpses over the past few issues.
Okay. Do you have more I Spies?
No.
Error detected. Error detected. No prize incoming.
Okay, error detected. I've only got one error detected, which is very petty. It's towards the middle of issue 40. General Rey, when he's on the flag, on the left-hand side of that double page, he's got you can see is the skin of his neck. On the following page, it's been coloured as if he's got some sort of roll neck that goes up to his jaw. So just over the course of a couple of panels, it changes. But I feel very petty pointing that out.
So, very related, the first of my 3 error detecteds, issue 40, page 11. This is the right-hand page. In the top 2 panels, Rey is on the flight deck. He's on the top of the flag. In the third panel, he's now underneath in an office, in a briefing room. And yet, this third panel where he says, "At ease, men," and he's talking to, it looks like, barrel roll, and his hands are behind his back, the wall behind him is colored with the same sort of sky clouds as the panel above it, when that background color should be the sort of metal wall of the next panel where Flint and Lady J are standing in front of the hologram typography. And then 2 error detecteds for the following issue. Issue 41, on page 14, some Joes are attacking some Cobras, and one of the Cobras, Televiper, says, "Grenade Wakum!" And one of these cool Vipers with the black mask says, "Move in, bunker level 2, they're headed your way." No one threw a grenade. In the previous panel, there are 3 Joes. One of them is holding pistols. No one is throwing a grenade. And in that panel where the Televiper is getting shot and an explosion is happening behind him, no one is inadvertently dropping a grenade.
Oh, looks like a grenade is going off in the background, though. It's just confused.
It's like, okay. I mean, geez, everyone, if you listen to our most recent episode of Talking Joe, where I talked about issue 297, and Genghis Khan is grabbing some grenades off the back of Frag Viper's backpack, you'll know that I'm really into grenades as an accessory, as a specific item sculpted onto G.I. Joe torsos and legs, and with the Frag Viper figure itself as a tiny individual piece. So when someone says grenade in a G.I. Joe comic, I'm looking for the grenade.
Where's the freaking grenade here? Okay.
And then lastly, page 21 of this second issue that we are reading right here. Page 21, panels 3 and 4. This team of SHIELD agents from the end of the Captain America, the first Avenger movie, are digging up on this glacier. No. I jest because I wish these were characters that we knew. I feel like this is an opportunity to have a couple Joes, not random masked soldiers, Red Cross conscripts, Cobra Arctic Vipers. It's like, no, like take their masks. I know it's really cold and they would definitely be wearing masks, but like let this be some Joes. Anyway,
they seem to be working for this general vicinity. Oh no, that's where they are working. Sorry.
In the fourth panel, one of them has a shovel, and they seem to have dug out the 3 Joes who were in a bomb vault, or a bomb-proof vault, or like a bank vault, or like a safe deposit box vault, which when Scanner blew up the entire base around them, they didn't also go up in that explosion, and all the debris didn't crush them. And so in my mind, that price sticker gun, or that like barcode scanner that the like Cobra Arctic Viper, like SHIELD rescue agent who's finding Captain America with Nick Fury in that Captain America movie in panel 2, that's actually like a laser. And he's like warmed up the ice and melted the Arctic bomb shelter so that with just a shovel, these 4 guys rescuing Captain America can actually pull Scarlet, Snake Eyes, and Duke out.
My no prize, it's an adamantium shovel.
And I guess because James Jonah Jameson is in issue 95, or is it 96 of Real American Hero, that converging, diverging universes, there can be adamantium for one panel in G.I. Joe. To me, this is like a funny nitpick. I'm not actually, frowning at, Jerwa or Seeley for this. It's like there's, I can invent the actual story that they've done some other work to get them out of that space. That's okay. Here's something. What is, Mark? I think you're gonna have to make a new jingle.
Oh no!
No, a good one. A good one
for a change.
A good one. Lots of your jingles are great. It's just because I'm grumpy about these 2 issues. Anyway, what is the opposite of error detected? What would some kind of surprise bonus be? Surprise, da, 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 surprise bonus, da, 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 da. G.I. Joe, something's great that you didn't expect. Tim and Devils do. Here you go. Here's a surprise bonus, da, 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 da. Okay, this issue 41, has an extra page. It's 23 pages long.
Oh wow!
And if it seems like I'm being disproportionately excited about just one extra page of comics, if you've been listening to the podcast, you probably remember me mentioning pretty often how I noticed the difference between modern comics that are 20 pages long and comics of the 80s and 90s that were 22 pages long. So I do appreciate an extra page. The price didn't go up. And this is a packed story where an extra page does make a difference.
Very good.
There's one other item about these 2 issues, which is sort of a bookend to how you and I started this episode, Mark. There is a page at the end of issue 41. It's after the 2 pages of letters pages. There's the Devil's Due news page, which says G.I. Joe being relaunched, though not as romance comic, as initially reported here, because the Devil's Due news page is always jokey. And it's a quick paragraph, and it says, Blaylock confirms new series, Joe Casey, Stefano Caselli. And then there's a 1-page ad for Dreamer Design, And then there's a one-page ad for the G.I. Joe Collectors Convention, which is happening in June of 2005. And then, this is something I alluded to at the beginning of the episode when I said retailers, and then I stopped talking. There's a full-page sort of ad, and it's got Storm Shadow's head, and this looks like a panel from a comic, and he's looking at you, and behind him is this sort of orange textured background. And in big block letters in a word balloon, Storm Shadow is saying, "Attention retailers." And then in smaller font, he says, "You are invited to join Devil's Due Publishing and other retailers across the nation for G.I. Joe Day on July 4th or July 4th weekend. G.I. Joe Day is an in-store event you host for your fans in promotion of the all-new G.I. Joe America's Elite." And then there are two more paragraphs of type where he says how stores can get involved and stores what free stuff they'll get. And the final sentence is fans, this is on the bottom, fans, encourage your local retailer to participate. So this feels like, and then there's the 2-page ad that you referred to. It's all red. It says the red shadows have risen. And then there's an ad for a G.I. Joe logo wall plaque from Diamond. But this is a bookend both of how we started the episode with the sort of rumors at the time and the actual news announcement that Jerwa's G.I. Joe would end and be replaced by Casey's G.I. Joe. It has some subtitle, but also that Blaylock in that interview, which was online in early 2005, describes sort of needing fans to come back to G.I. Joe. And this one-page ad, it's addressed to retailers, but it's also addressed to readers. If you're getting the subtext.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And indeed, they sort of, in the blurb, they go a lot further than they would normally do in this Devil's Due news, that they'd say, what is true, though, is that before then, one major character will die. We're going on a limb and say it's Snake Eyes. He's not popular, right? So I think we're having a trail that in this next arc, at least one major character will die in these final 2 issues.
Yes, and if I can go back one issue, so you're referring to the Devil's Due news page at the end of 41.
Mm-hmm.
The inside back cover to 40 is it's a grid of 12 squares. It's 12 faces. There's Wraith and Cobra Commander and Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow and some others. And in red block font, it says, "The war will end, one will die, the red shadows will rise." And then the G.I. Joe logo is cracked, and then it says May 2005. And so the threat, the promise of this one-page ad, and I think this is a new art for this ad. I don't think these are vignettes taken from existing panels of other issues. I think this is new Seeley art, and it's colored in it's almost completely black and white. It's a little warm. There's the tiniest bit of sort of red brown in it, but you'd call it a black and white, gray tones. But the threat or promise is that one of these characters, one of these popular or recently made cool Joes or Cobras, will die. And the question is that Joe Colton, who just got shot a few pages earlier at the end of 41, or is yet someone else going to die in 42, 43?
I know the answer, but indeed.
Yeah, I think I do too. I think I remember from general G.I. Joe fan chatter in 2005. But anyway, I have not read G.I. Joe 42 and 43, so I will come into our next Disavowed episode with an open mind.
So yeah, I think given that they're double-sized issues, maybe we should spread it over two episodes, 1 episode each. What do you think?
That sounds great. This is where I'm obliged to say, maybe with fewer comics to talk about, we'll do a shorter episode. And I'm sure our next episode, just about the double-sized issue 42, is going to be 3 hours. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
You heard it here first, folks. Mark's going to have to break it in half. It's going to be a 5-part miniseries. We're going to do 15 pages at a time.
Very good. So do 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 boo boo bee bappity bap bap boo. Oh yes, Yo Joage.
Yo cola, not grape soda.
It's Yo Joage time.
Now I hesitate to ask you, Tim, given all the discussion to date. So let me go in first before I'm swayed by and my score is brought crushingly down by by yours. I went into this recording before I started talking to you feeling very positive about these issues. I kind of appreciated that Joe had somewhat of a millstone around his neck, that he wasn't necessarily going to be able to execute his longer story as he wanted, that there is this end goal in mind that is likely to have meant that these last few issues are maybe not quite going the way that he wanted, but I did enjoy them. I thought for the most part it was well handled, doing what they were doing and working within the constraints they probably had to work within. So I'm going to go 7. I did like these and would happily go back and reread them.
I'm glad that you got a lot out of them, and I'm going to give them a 3. I think they don't work on many different levels. I don't think they're great G.I. Joe stories. I don't think they're great stories. I don't love the art. Coloring's fine. I mean, it's not my favorite, but it's not my least favorite of the Devil's Due run. I might sort of bump this up to a 4 out of sympathy for the creative team, because to go back to an example I cited earlier, in the Marvel Transformers comic, at issue 75, there's a big fight, and the creative team is firing on all cylinders. And issue 75 has a fill-in artist, but it's amazing. And everyone's favorite character sacrifices himself. And it bummed me out when I read the issue. I was really moved. And I didn't think he would necessarily come back. The writer was going to bring him back at issue 100. Like, it was going to happen in over 2 years. They were starting sort of a new mega arc. And the book ends 5 months later, and that character comes back. And it's moving, but man, is it rushed. And I thought, well, I guess I had to do it because the book's over. So I have sympathy for a writer who expects to have many issues to tell a story and then is given very few. And I did come into these 2 issues before this episode with an open mind, and I had not read them. But the negatives really outweigh the positives for me. But we got to do a new jingle. There's an extra page. The covers are great. I like Cobra Commander's machinations. His and I like his speeches in the issues. So 4.
Okay. I didn't specifically call it out, but I often do appreciate Brendan Joa's ear for dialogue, such as when Mercer is sort of teasing.
Oh yeah, that's a mean line.
What is it? So, what did he say?
Something cold and
If you
cheap?
don't trust me, I'm more than happy to turn in my badge and go find something cold and expensive, like your sister.
Right.
Oof.
I also I will say, even though these 2 issues are rocky for me, I am really interested to see how Jerwa and Seeley wrap up this version of G.I. Joe. I am excited to read the next 2 issues. It's not like I'm going to start out with like a scowl and my arms folded. I want it to be, if not like awesome and my favorite thing, I want it to be interesting, and I do love talking about it. So to my beleaguered co-host and our listeners who may think, oh, this guy's a bummer. Thanks for listening.
That panel of Mercer as well has got a nice little bit of cartooning, sort of unusually for Seeley. He's sort of putting this quite expressionistic face.
His smirk. Yeah, it's extra smirky. But his sideburns are even sharper than General Rey's. So it's like, man, Seeley really likes these sideburns. I have only pulled off sideburns like that for a few weeks at a time. I'm not joking. I have only pulled off sideburns like that for a few weeks at a time in my life. And then it felt like too much. So I went back to normal sideburns and no sideburns.
Okay, so back next time on Talking Joe Disavowed, we will continue our look at the Brandon Jerwa era of G.I. Joe as it comes to a conclusion. We will be checking out part 1 of The Dawn of the Red Shadows, which is issue 42. And over on the regular show, as it comes out, we will be looking at the issues of ARA from Larry Hama as they are released and talking to the creators and so much more besides. Now, Tim, where can people find you when you are not criticizing comics from almost 20 years ago?
I prefer the word critiquing comics from almost 20 years ago. Video essays with my creative partners at our YouTube page, Atomic Abe Productions. My brick and mortar comic book store is Hub Comics in Somerville, Massachusetts, and I had a really great interaction with two customers last night. Got them to buy some G.I. Joe comics, and my G.I. Joe blog is arealamericanbook.com.
Excellent. People can find out more about this show in the usual places. talkingjoe.co.uk is a website that has links to all of the places. We have a Facebook group. Lots of people been joining that lately. We have got a Twitter, an Instagram. We've got a voicemail facility for you to leave comments and feedback. And we also have a Patreon, patreon.com/talkingjoe. So a big thanks to all of our backers, who include Richard, Sam J, Bill, Christopher, Justin, Rob, and Brian, who are getting early access to episodes as well as some exclusive content. And that is us done. But remember,
nobody beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Laters.
This could be bonus waffle, or this could be for the next episode. But I did have a really nice interaction with some customers last night and got them to buy some G.I. Joe comics. Mm-hmm. And also, I forgot that in preparation for this episode, because I didn't like how the characters were dying, I found from a Marvel DC comic writer's blog, his reflections on when he killed a character. And I wanted to read these 3 paragraphs because it sort of reminds me of how I feel about Jerwa killing all of these characters. But the episode's really long, so I will just save this for
the next time that someone dies.
Yes, which is either I'll just force it in the next issue if no one dies, or in the next issue I'm promised from an inside back cover full page ad that someone will die. So
let's look forward to that.
Yeah, so Tim, note to self, read those 3 paragraphs from Priest's website.